Today we're diving into one of the boldest financial cons in history, a story about a broke ex-convict who convinced one of the most respected companies on earth to print him a small fortune and nearly brought down a country in the process. It's a quiet December evening in 1925, and a teller at a money changer's counter in Porto is holding a banknote he's seen 1,000 times before. 500 escudos. Nothing special, except something about this one feels off. The paper's a little too crisp. The serial numbers don't quite line up with what they should. He's about to unravel one of the greatest financial frauds in human history, and he has no idea that the man behind it had been sitting in a prison cell just 2 years earlier, dreaming this whole thing up out of pure boredom and spite. Meet Artur Alves Reis, 28 years old, broke, charming, and about as far from a criminal mastermind as you'd expect. Portugal in the 1920s was a mess: hyperinflation, coups, governments collapsing every few months, and Reis, sitting in a jail cell after getting caught embezzling from a railway company, had a lot of time to read. So he read up on how Portugal's currency actually worked. And what he found was almost too good to believe. The Bank of Portugal didn't even print its own money. It outsourced the job to a British firm called Waterloo & Sons, one of the most respected banknote printers on earth. And Reis realized something: if he could convince Waterloo that he was authorized to order a print run, he wouldn't be counterfeiting anything. He'd be making real money. Genuine, 100% legitimate Portuguese currency. It would just be money nobody actually approved. So here's the plan. Reis forges an elaborate secret contract, claiming the Bank of Portugal had quietly authorized a syndicate, his syndicate, to print a batch of 500 escudo notes to fund development in the Portuguese colony of Angola. He fakes signatures, he bribes a notary too lazy to actually read the paperwork, and he sells the whole story with the one thing that makes any scam work: secrecy. He tells Waterloo this has to stay hush-hush for political reasons. And somehow, this basically unknown Portuguese businessman convinces one of the most prestigious printing companies in the world to start cranking out real Portuguese banknotes for him. Now, if you'd printed hundreds of thousands of legitimate notes and shipped them to yourself, what would you do first? Reis didn't just sit on a mountain of cash. He got smart. He used the money to buy control of a bank, the Banco de Angola e Metropole, and started using it to launder the notes into the economy through loans, real estate, small investments. He was rich, genuinely, visibly, enviably rich. Overnight, this guy who'd been in prison 2 years earlier was rubbing shoulders with Lisbon's elite, throwing money around, funding businesses. People assumed he was just a brilliant financier. Nobody thought to ask where a convicted embezzler had suddenly found this kind of fortune. Except one newspaper did. A paper called O Século started digging into this mysterious new bank of his and its suspiciously generous, low-interest loans. Why would a bank with barely any deposits be handing out cash like that? The reporters started asking questions about the bank's directors, about Reis's background, about where all this money was actually coming from. And that same suspicion trickled down to the street level, to a money changer's teller in Porto, holding a note that just didn't sit right in his hands. Once that teller flagged the note, it was over fast. Authorities traced it back, and the pieces fell into place almost immediately. On December 5, 1925, O Século ran the story on its front page. The headline: "The country in crisis." The next day, police raided the bank, seized the documents, and arrested Reis. And when investigators actually added up how much fake but real money had entered circulation, the number was staggering. Reis had pumped an amount equal to over £1 million into the Portuguese economy in less than a year. That's somewhere around 15–16% of all the currency circulating in the entire country. One guy, one forged contract, one lazy notary. The fallout was brutal. Waterloo & Sons, the printer that got fooled, never really recovered its reputation and was eventually swallowed up by a rival. The scandal shattered whatever trust the Portuguese public still had in their government, and historians point to this exact crisis as one of the sparks that helped topple Portugal's first republic, clearing the path for a military dictatorship and eventually, decades of rule under Antonio de Oliveira Salazar. A prison daydream from a broke ex-convict had, in a roundabout way, helped reshape the political future of an entire country. As for Reis himself, he was finally tried in 1930 and sentenced to 20 years. He ended up serving 15 of them, walking free in 1945. But the ending isn't some triumphant return to wealth. He died broke, 10 years after his release, his fortune long gone, remembered less as a genius and more as a cautionary tale. Because that's the strange thing about a con this audacious: it can shake an entire nation to its core, and still leave the man who pulled it off with absolutely nothing to show for it in the end. If you enjoy videos like this, please consider liking and subscribing.